Hey everyone, welcome back to COVID Conversations. We briefly were talking today about this issue of scarcity. And I'm curious just when I say that, like what comes up in you, the listeners' minds. But um, for me, what was coming up with some clients recently is the idea that when people feel like there's not enough of something, any particular resource, that one of the things that happens is that we sometimes make decisions that we might not otherwise make. We feel desperation, feel anxiety, and that can lead us down all sorts of paths that we never intended, even against our better judgment sometimes. So in particular, where that's been coming up, I think around the COVID stuff, is that there's certainly been a scarcity of, or a fear of scarcity of food, even, right? So anyone that has a history of any sort of eating disorder, but particularly restrictive eating disorders or eating disorders that are like binge purge connections, I think are often being triggered right now because of the fear that food might not be accessible. Whether or not it's available is a whole other story, but accessible. And then for some people, obviously, scarcity comes up when people are thinking about finances. So either losing their job or fear of losing your job, or even just fear of losing like your retirement savings if the stock market has crashed, those sorts of things. And then also just the scarcity issue that comes up with people being alone a lot, right? Lacking connection, and how hard that is for people to not have physical touch. One of my clients said today that she heard from her friend that someone had given someone else a hug. Someone who lives alone had given someone else a hug. And the man said that he broke down crying when it happened because he just hadn't realized how much he was missing that.
Yeah.
How hard that is on people.
I had a client say that she was at the auto repair shop, and she'd been going there for years. And a man who works there put his hand on her shoulder like he'd probably done 800 times before and said, "It's really good to see you." And her instinct was like, "Oh my gosh, this feels so good," quickly followed by a wave of, "Oh no, he shouldn't be touching me." Right. So I think that that's just sort of like another level. And it's so apparent about how much we're missing this physical touch. And even when we say scarcity, like when I hear that, my stomach tenses. You get that stress response immediately from that. Right. And so that's, I think, part of what sends us back into those patterns, whether it's having a history of maladaptive eating, disordered eating, or issues with finances. Having that stress response kick in, it prevents us from seeing things as clearly as we normally would be able to see them, right?
Yeah. I think with the finances, right? You mentioned like disordered eating behaviors, but so many people also struggle with spending, right? And while obviously we're not all shopping in stores the way we used to be or other things, internet shopping is alive and well. And I think it's really easy to go down a rabbit hole of fearing that you're not going to get something, I mean, like even just toilet paper or paper towels, and then overbuying because it's scary to think about not having something that you really feel like you need or want. And that just triggers all sorts of anxieties for people.
Yeah, it does. And I think it also, you're right, it is a rabbit hole, because once we start feeling that scarcity and feeling the anxiety, then we feel everything that comes along with that, which is the lack of control and what are we going to do and what's the future look like, and catastrophizing. And it's tough. And we wanted, I guess we wanted to share that this idea of scarcity it's common, it's out there, we're experiencing it, it's real. And I think if you find yourself experiencing it, just acknowledge that that's what it is, that that's what it's coming up, and hopefully you'll understand a bit more about the reasons why it's happening and why it's making you feel so anxious.
Yes. And if you want to hear more about this, there was a great Hidden Brain podcast from NPR, actually a couple of years ago now, I think, right?
It's been a while.
And I think it was called Tunnel Vision, if I remember correctly. And it's about this concept of scarcity and how that leads to sort of, a woman who lost her job overspending and running out of money, even though her intention was to protect her family, of course. So I think it's a really nice perspective that our brain goes into like a really primal survival mode when we feel threatened. And scarcity is a threat to us on top of the physical threat looming of being sick. So I think our brains are being taxed right now. And if you're not being as productive as you feel like you should
Mhm.
be, or as kind or compassionate to others as you think you should be, or patient, or any of those things, remembering that kind of course you're not, because your brain is
Yeah.
pretty taxed right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. See you next time.